Hey, good morning, everyone. Just back here, gonna spitball and do a little bit of chit and chat with you this morning. Um, Here's to the coffee. So what's going on? I'll tell you what's going on. So you may have seen that I am stepping into the world of certifications, and I have a new certification coming out this month in Ireland, TUC Dublin, for Speedgate Golf. So today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about Speedgate Golf. A lot of you may not have heard of it, you may not know what it is, and it's something I sat on for a little bit too long, and it's a method of developing superior speed with your athletes, your team sport athletes, and the applications of it are endless because it doesn't revolve around sprinting, it revolves around psychology. And the base premise of it is a psychological intervention of stress inoculation, which opens up this whole realm of coaching and cognitive behavior therapy and all sorts of restructuring and anchoring and associative learning and all these wonderful things, which we'll talk about in the certification in a lot more detail. But I just kind of wanted to jump on today and tell you about how it came about. And if you've not heard, I've done a podcast with Joel Smith on Just Fly about it. So just search me in there and you'll see it. We did a webinar and bits and pieces. But so in 2017, my second season at Ealing Trailfinders, after moving over from Wasps, I'd worked the previous year in track and field and with a company called West London Track and Field. And I had been sort of an assistant coach and the S&C coach there. And I noticed, and I love, you know me, I love speed. I'm fascinated by it. And I'm fascinated of the training process of speed more than anything, because the end result is the end result. And in that program, we have benchmark workouts. We had the use and the ability of using gates over and over again. And it was something that I wanted to bring into the team sport environment and something that I wanted to bring into Ealing, because I knew that the circumstances that we had at the time, we were the only team in the league with an artificial surface. It was causing a lot of injuries. And pelvic and lumbar pelvic issues and groin issues and some calf, and I'll talk all about that because I ended up doing my master's research on it. But I needed us to learn to use the surface to our favor and also my bias of speed first. And so with that, I had to in my mind, I had to go through this decision-making process. So I had to grow. As a coach, I had to really grow really, really fast and remove some associations and attachments. And so I started creating categories in my mind. And it's something that we teach on the mentorship. And, the use of numbers and the use of metrics. But one of the fundamental things that you need to measure is in the realm of which you can directly influence it. So for example, if you're going to measure speed, then you need to be in the environment to measure speed, aka running outside or on a track. And if you're going to measure jumps and ballistics and stuff like that, then they are a second order metric in these, if we can associate up towards speed from a hierarchical CNS point of view and technical and all the other wonderful things that complexity gives us, then we need to create a hierarchical system of metric analysis. So that's what I did. Something that I use to this day, and keep tweaking and changing it. But so I was like, well, what's my number one metric going to be? Well, it's going to be maximum velocity determined from fly, sprint, or GPS. And so I was like, well, I need to hang my hat on that number a little bit, because everything else falls underneath it. Even short acceleration is going to fall underneath it to a certain extent. So I set out and went to work. And with that, then I was like, so if I need to, the question is, if I need to measure speed readily, then I need to make sure that we can use the gates every week, every session, multiple times a week. They have to be accustomed to using gates and measuring times. And it was one of the biggest parallels that I drew, is that when we were working with the sprinters, when the gates came out, nothing changed, because they're so accustomed and have been conditioned. Their psychology has been conditioned to sprinting with time and getting time, because that's what their sport is. So, of course, then they're going to be much more acclimatized to it. Whereas in team sports, traditionally, speed gates will come out at the beginning of preseason, then they'll collect dust in the cupboard. And that makes me sad, that upsets me, because it shows a real lack of understanding of the training process, of which speed gates don't get used and sprints don't get measured on a regular and a repeated basis to determine readiness, at least, let alone improvement. But that's a whole other programming rabbit hole that I could go down and rant about, but I'm not going to do that for you today. Let's stay on why Speedgate Golf. So being in that position, I wasn't writing the schedule, and I had to play the system as best as possible. And the person that was writing the schedule was quite closed-minded in his approach to strength and conditioning. And that's all I will say on that topic. But he knew that, and I was in charge, and he knew that I was putting speed first. And so he gave me rope to hang myself, essentially, but I didn't. And so when we were looking at the schedules in preseason, I was allocated 2 30-minute sessions a week in preseason, on a Tuesday morning and a Thursday morning, for the development of speed for 47 players. And they were split in 2 groups. And then that was it. That was all I had for the whole preseason. And, I built a whole system around how to effectively develop speed within team sport environments where you don't have any time, materials, or access to equipment. But what I had was the 30-minute allocation. So I was like, these guys can't even warm up. These guys don't even know a warm up. They're not conditioned at low level sprint capacity levels. And if you start taking someone on a journey of getting them fast, you'll soon realize why GPP exists and why those phases of training need to be adhered to, because if you don't, then they just blow up. So I had 6 to 8 weeks to try and do a couple of things. Get them ready to sprint, and then teach them to sprint, and then actually start formulating any form of data to show some improvements for their own buy-in. And the purpose of the program also had to prove to myself that what I was doing was good enough, and then also to the higher up to say, well, actually, this goes here, use a number to protect my job. Yeah, 100%. That's what most people do. And protect that part of the program. And so the risk was getting the gates out. And what happens when the gates come out? People get twitchy feet, and everyone gets excited, and the high arousal, what happens. People get hurt. People do something stupid. And so I went out. I went out in the process thinking to myself, right, I just have to get speed gates in our environment, whatever way, and as soon as possible. So essentially, as a Cliff Notes version, I put the gates on the side of the pitch in the bag, just brought them out, didn't use them. And then slowly but slowly, I progressed the visual exposure and the language that I used and associated to the gates during these sessions. And by session 4 or 5, something like that, I had the gates standing up on the pitch. And asked them to test the gates out, and don't need to sprint fast, but you just need to run through them. And at that point, everything started to change. And at that point, I started to see a huge opportunity, because the first time the gates came out, there were so many questions. There was, oh, are we using the gates? What are we timing? Blah, 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 blah. You can see kids in a candy shop type thing. And a sweet shop, sorry, I'm not American. And so then they had, so all of this, you can imagine the pandemonium, hot pre-season. And then by the time I had actually asked them to run through it, it wasn't exciting anymore. It had normalized itself. And I thought, wow, that's the best accident ever, because I then had an element of control over the use of the gates. And I thought, well, if I can just get them to run through it slow, then why can't I keep getting them to run through it slow? So it ticks a lot of my boxes of what I need. So I was like, well, why don't I make a game? And if I make a game, then it's going to be fun, and there's going to be an association to reward based on running slow, not running fast, because we know that if you try to run too fast, you'll ultimately run slow. So during that time, the blocks and everything, it was all extensive work, rhythm, relaxation, timing, coordination. I tell you, they couldn't get through a 5, 6, 7 drill extensive warm-up without blowing and getting tight. So the physical capacities weren't even there. And that's very common with a lot of team sport athletes, very, very common. The underlying tissue preparation for speed is just not there. So I prefaced that the athletes weren't a sack of shit. They were just rugby players. And so then I thought, okay, so I'm a big believer in submax training, and I'm a big believer in the art of motor skill first, especially with all these things. Like if you go back to look at Piaget, then, you know, gross motor skill, like stages of learning through infancy, like 0 to 2, it's all gross motor skill. So, you know, that's our fundamental path of progression, and our fundamental path of learning is through gross motor skill first. So if we can learn the gross motor skill and go look at all the skill acquisition stuff, then of course we're going to get better at whatever we do, and our ability, because our efficiency increases, our resistance and our bandwidth of variation decreases. So therefore we're going to create more consistency, and off of that level of consistency we can then load, because the main goal of getting sprint training into a team sport program is to get athletes in the ability to actually use sprinting as a loading tool. And so that was the path of speed gate golf. And I chose for forwards 2.2 seconds over 10 meters, and backs 2 seconds, and they had to run that time. And it was funny, the reward was they get to shake my hand and take a picture, and they get to go on my Instagram and say that they won speed gate golf for the day. And it's amazing what happens when people start redirecting their attention into actually the subtleties of the movement without even knowing it. So in order to run a 2 second 10, and if you've got speed gates, go out and try it. It's really difficult to run a 2 second 10, because all you want to do is run fast, but you can't. You have to be patient. You have to learn. You have to hold your nerve, hold your timing, know your consistency. And then you've got these guys queuing up, 10, 15 guys at a time, queuing up, and just rep. And then a wonderful thing happens is that because there's a consistency between the time between reps, then they start to tune into that frequency. And they start to tune into the frequency of this time between the beeps of the gates. Beep, 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 beep. So it becomes metronomic in nature. And it was funny because roughly they were trying to run 2 seconds, and they would go roughly every 4 seconds, because it was literally just go, go, go. So we had a metronomic timing that was happening through the whole process. And then lo and behold, you get like a 1.9, and then everyone's like, wow. and then you get a 2:0 something or a high 1:9, and the energy just picks up because it all becomes about running 2 seconds. And then you get your first 2:0, and it's like a 2:0 something, and it's like, oh my God, he's run slow. What is going on? And so you have that, and then it's like the 4-minute mile. As soon as one person does it, the other person, people crack it. And in between, you can coach, because you can talk about separation of the hips. You can talk about leg retraction. You can talk about these things. Is someone who runs the 2 second then becomes your KPI of your technical model, because in order to do that, they have to run in a fluid, rhythmic form, because you're not allowed to just sprint and then slow down. You have to run a consistent rep. So from there, the birth of it and the results over 6 to 8 weeks, I had all my backs were running in the low 1.6s off the top speed. So everyone was over 9.5 meters per second on the 40-meter mark. And we'd done it. And that is the birth of the Speedgate Golf system, which now is, going down the rabbit hole the last couple of years and pulling it into everything else that I do. It's a whole all-encompassing beast, which I can't wait to teach you and show you and guide you through and give you all the resources that you need to implement it. And also working on resources and tools that you can have and do without using gates, without using, to those times, because I know gates can be financially expensive, but the whole underpinning philosophy. So you're thinking and you're sat there going, well, why would I come to a Speedgate Golf certification from Sportland and I don't have speed gates? Because the Speedgate Golf is 10% of the whole process. The 90% around it is what makes the Speedgate Golf so fantastic and revolutionary. And I'm going to talk more about it up until the first event, and answer any questions. So if you are watching this on YouTube, head over to Coach Sportland Instagram and you'll check everything out there. If you're in the Facebook group, make sure you're answering questions and asking questions and get involved. Send me messages. If you're listening to the podcast, check out the links. You can watch this on YouTube and join my free private Facebook group community where I stream these live and get in on the action. And also, if you want to be on one of these calls, send me a message. You can grab a coffee at 8 o'clock in the morning and join me. Why not? Let's do this. So have a fantastic day. I wish you all the best. Thank you very much for your support. And I cannot wait till March 27th. It's going to be beautiful.